Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, once our guests present, we turn it over to them and have them tell us all the things that they have created so that you and I can see the picture that they have. And then once we go back and dissect how they got there, we can learn from them, extract some of their principles that they utilize to change their life to make them the person they are today. And it is my pleasure and honor to welcome Vikram. Vikram, talk to them. Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment, man.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are listening in the world. I am honored, Ken, to be on your show. We've had some great little side conversations
Yes, we
about
have.
how we get to where we're at today,
Yeah.
and I just wanted to thank you from my heart to your heart for this opportunity.
Thank you, sir.
So I've lived a pretty interesting life, and I've had a pretty full life, which has brought me kind of to where I'm at today. And I've always felt that business is a spiritual game, but in the Western culture, we treat business as if it's everything.
Mm-hmm.
And we, people say, "Oh, I'm creating a business so that I can have freedom and I can do the things that I want to do." Yet when they create their business takes over their life.
Yeah.
And so what I love doing is I love bringing that heart-centeredness and the fulfillment back, because a lot of people are burnt out. A lot of people are stressed out. They've kind of lost their connection to source. They forgot about why they're doing it. They're just chasing the dollar, which, don't get me wrong, I love money and money loves me.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with being financially stable and even abundant. Depending on what scriptures you read or what you study, they will tell you that having money is not a bad thing. It's what you do with the money that, could be of a higher or lower vibration. So I've created courses, it's mainly coaching programs where we work on not just how to improve your sales and your business, your your ability to convert prospects, but we also do it from a heart-centered way so that you're fulfilling the different buckets that we need to be full in life. Because if you're, when I was in my mid 30s, which wasn't too long ago, I was making a lot of money, but I wasn't happy. I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
look at myself in the mirror, and I couldn't understand, Ken, why I was so unhappy and why I was so miserable. I was miserable, right?
Yeah.
Every day felt like Groundhog's Day. I didn't feel, even though, we're helping people, I was helping people in my company. They were making great money. They were, having whatever successes they were. Life just wasn't fulfilling.
Yeah.
And so that's what kind of brought me to going through a whole bunch of personal development, a whole bunch of spiritual development, and getting to a point today where it's not just about making money, it's about making impact.
Yeah. I think they train us because I came out of from the professional realm as well, corporate America world, and I think it's not even just the corporate America world. I think it's the world, how they program us. Victim, is that we grab into something and we just work, 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 work. And I think we miss part, as you were talking about, the combination of the spiritual aspect and the professional piece. I think if we could marry these two, man, and I'm glad that you have programs to teach people how to find that balance to have that symbiotic relationship between the two realms. It gives you that peacefulness within your inside, but it also makes you even, I believe, it makes you even more wise and smart in how you approach your business and to get your clients and all that type of stuff. You become, I think, you become a little more sensitive to the situation, which will cause you to make your decisions even more quickly and profoundly. What do you think on that? How do you feel on that?
Yeah, I mean, when you go to certain parts of the world, they people say, "Oh, it's just a slower culture, right? It's just slower."
Hmm.
And I don't know that it's necessarily slower. I think it's more fulfilling
Yeah,
in some aspects. And I think everybody's also got their own journey that they need to go on.
life.
And So when we figure out what our journey is and why we're going through it, right? We're all spiritual beings
Hmm.
living a human
Yeah,
experience.
I agree.
And so living this human experience allows us to play and do things and grow, and it allows us to explore and be unique,
Hmm.
right? And so we all have a journey, we all have a path. And I might be missing the question you asked, but we go through everything to get to where we need to go, and the enlightenment comes by sometimes the tough times.
I think it that's the purpose of the tough times, is to cause us to dig a little deeper than the surface or how we've been programmed. Let's go back because I know it's my habit here, is to go back. I wanted you to talk a little to your childhood as to how you were brought up and the circumstances that caused you to start framing your world based on the background of your parents and grandparents, society, stuff like that.
So I was brought up in a my mom was a first generation born Indian in the US. Her parents were
Hmm.
very traditional. And then my dad was born in India, and he came to the United States about 45 years ago now. And so our household was a little mixed. It
Mm.
was a little Western, a little Eastern. We spent a lot of time with our grandparents, who were, they wanted us to fit in. They didn't want us to be bullied. They didn't want us to suffer through the same things that their kids suffered through. So we had kind of the strict household, but the not so strict household. And
Hmm.
I think our parents, like many parents, wanted us to have a better life than they did. At least my dad did. My mom grew up in a relatively, upper middle class family, but I think my dad wanted us to have a better life. He wanted to be able to provide and be a good
Yeah.
father. And so he worked a lot, and he didn't quite, we weren't really bad kids. My older brother was a bad kid, from out the gate. My older
Hmm.
brother was just mischievous and
Hmm.
breaking things, and he got himself into quite a bit of trouble. But I think one of the defining moments of our lives was in sixth grade, our parents sent us to boarding school in India. And
Wow.
my experience with that was completely different than my older brothers. To me, it was a punishment to my especially because the school that we ended up at was we grew up in the back of, my dad's a physician, and so we grew up in the back of nice cars, and we lived in a nice
Hmm.
neighborhood, right? We never had a huge house until we came back from India, but we had a nice house, and money wasn't an issue.
Yeah.
My dad used to make us think money was an issue, but in reality, my dad was doing quite well, um,
Yeah.
in comparison to what, even in comparison to people now. He was making more money then than a lot of people make now. So we
Yeah.
weren't financially struggling, but he always kind of created that scarcity mindset for us. And we
Hmm.
also had, you know he wanted to give us the life, but he also wanted to be in the limelight. So he always
Gotcha.
wanted to kind of be the reason why we were successful. And
Mm.
it's taken a toll on us, because we have limiting beliefs that I've been working through for a long time. But when we went to India, we went from living in, the back of Mercedes to a school that had maggots. The toilets didn't flush. The teachers would beat us. The playground had no grass. It was just
Um,
full of rocks. It was a pretty drastic change. I used to tell one of my teachers that I would get them a green card if they let me sleep in class and not do anything. Right. So, I mean, you just do what you got to do, because it was tough. We would get
yeah.
really sick.
How
And
old were you?
sixth
How
grade,
old were you guys? Sixth
sixth
grade?
grade, and my older brother was in seventh grade. And I think the
Okay.
toughest part about that first school was a bunch of our cousins from bunch of our cousins had gone with us. Somehow my parents had talked them into, like, hey, let's send all of our kids to hell. And I saw them leaving because the conditions of the school were so poor. And I said to my parents, I said, why are we still here when everybody else is leaving? Like,
Yeah.
you need to come and save us. And they said, no, it's not that bad. We saw it. It's not that big of a deal. And all of our aunts and uncles are like, you guys need to take your kids out of this dump. Like, this is a really bad
Mm.
school. And they didn't. And at that point, I kind of realized, like, accidentally, like, even the people who love you the most, you got to fend for yourself. Like, you got to figure
Yeah.
out life. And I would just, you just do what you had to do. Like, we would get the little kids behind our school to bring us little dumplings. We would throw them money. They'd bring us dumplings back, and then we'd tip them out.
Wow.
And so they would always come back because they wanted that tip, right? So they didn't steal our money.
Hmm.
Um, but that was like when I got into my first fist fight. And that's when like, you kind of have to start growing up, where a lot of
Yeah.
times, if I lived in the States, I wouldn't have had to grown up at that age.
Yeah. 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 I had to get creative, I guess, on how to start maneuvering in that situations once you were placed there. So you guys were there for how long? How many years were you there
We were in the
until
really
you
bad
moved
school
on?
for 1 year, and then we transferred to a better school for another year, and then I was done with that. So I came
Yeah.
back as a
Gotcha.
freshman in high school, which is really, if you want to screw your kids up, bring them back to a different school, no friends, a new house, after they spent 2 years in a foreign country. And that's how you really screw your kids up, like, for a couple of good, 10, 12 years.
Yeah, it's fascinating because my brother and I we have conversations because we were transplanted kids as well. We were from British Guiana. I was brought here when I was about 12 years old, and when I came to the United States, I was in my second year in college in Guyana, and they put me in junior high school. I almost died, man. It kind of it just fried my brain because I could not. The culture shock was so intense because I couldn't understand, number one, how the kids were relating to the teachers, and
Right.
I just kept going to my parents. I don't know where we're at, but this is not good because kids are talking back to teachers and stuff like that, and we don't ever see that stuff within that educational system from where I came from.
Right.
And as far as the learning ability, we were when we went into school, man, we went into school, you know. So it was a hard thing to get used to, and I almost it was tough on me. So I can understand how it is to be tossed into a situation where you're so uncomfortable that you're not that it can mess you up mentally, and it sure did me in many ways that I had to work through as I got older, as you were talking about. So, talk to you about some of those things that you started to frame within your mind as a result of the situations like you that you were in. I'm not sure. I know you felt that you were being punished when you were sent to the school. Did that morph into anything? Stay, emotional stuff like uh, I didn't feel worthy enough. My parents didn't like me. Any of those type stuff.
Oh,
Did
yeah.
any of that type of emotion stuff uh, were given birth from those situations?
I mean, I don't know that it was just those situations, but for sure, like, there was, a lot of worthiness issues around relationships, around finances,
Yeah,
around, how much joy you can have in this world, how much, right? Like, I love my parents. I think they're good human beings, but I live on the other side of the country from them. And,
yeah,
when people say, oh, why do you move so far from your family? I said, I love them, but I also like my space. And I think that stems
yeah,
because
hmm,
as a kid, I spent 2 years away from them and I didn't need
yeah,
them. And I didn't, and I was able to fend for myself. And so I do believe there's a lot of worthiness issues that have stemmed from the childhood. I believe that there's a lot of self doubts. Am I allowed to be happy? Am I allowed to be in a good relationship? Am I allowed to, have all of the things that would make me a better human being? Um, am I allowed to have the financial success and safety because I didn't feel safe, right? I didn't feel,
yeah, yeah,
um, I felt abandoned, right? Like,
hmm,
I've had therapists on and off for years. And now I just have one that I get to talk to all the time, right? Like, I'm blessed that I
yeah, yeah,
have that ability to realize, like, hey, you know what? You're not broken. You're just going through your journey. Like, we're not needing to be
yeah,
fixed, but what I was lacking. And, my dad, even to this day, he has a hard time taking not orders, but like just if we ask him, if we say something like, hey, well, this is a good idea, we should try it out, he'll say no. But if his friend says it, he'll say yes. If we say, hey, dad,
Yeah.
why don't you come
Hmm.
visit us for the weekend? He'll say, I don't have time. But then if his friends show up for the weekend, unexpected, he'll drop everything for him. And
Hmm.
so,
Wow.
like you'll see, and I don't know that he knows why he does it. Like that's just how he grew up, I think. So he hasn't fixed his generational traumas.
Yeah.
But it's
I,
one of the things
yeah.
that I've worked on my whole life, or for at least the last 7 or 8 years, is understanding how to open those up, and then the people that I attract to work with me typically have certain issues like that as well. Like I have a lot of men and women that are feel broken. They're not broken, but they feel broken. And they're scared
Yeah.
to ask for help. They're scared to admit that they have shortcomings because, in our household, everything had to be perfect. Like even for Christmas, we had to dress up and brush our teeth and wait for everybody to be awake and, like eat breakfast. And then we got to open the presents. And I'm like, as we
Wow.
got older, I was like, why did we have to take away the hat? Like that's the
The
joy.
joy.
Yeah, that's the joy. Like
Yeah.
stinky
Yeah.
breath, running down the stairs in your little
Hmm.
PJs. Like, why do we got to take
Yeah.
the joy out of everything? Like it doesn't. We're not in the military, and
Yeah.
so me and my dad have had some conversations around it. But like even to this day, I started promoting this new wellness product that I'm a big fan of. And he first, before he even watched the video about it, he's like, I'm not interested. I'm like, just watch another doctor
Mm.
talk. Oh, another doctor's talking about it? I said, yes, just watch another. Oh, okay. I'll watch the 5 minute video. I'm at the gym. Watch the video. He called me back. He's like, okay, this is real stuff. I was like, Pops, come on. And I'm the nerd of the family. You know that I love reading about wellness things, like anything that can give me an advantage on the bike or anything that's going to give me an advantage to live longer or stay healthier and stronger. Like, come on, Pops, like I'm the nerd of the family. And but he still has to fight it. And then it's like, hey, here's the program, right? Like here's the program. Like I'm
Yeah.
40 years young. I'm super strong.
Hmm.
I can do 100-mile bike rides. Like I can ride fast. I can run. I can do all sorts of stuff. I've proven myself to others that I'm an authority in the space. And it's like, hey, Pops, you're doing these exercises wrong. Why don't we get you a trainer? Like, hey, there's these things that we've bought that are part of a business that we own together, which you tell other people to do, but you don't do them yourself. It's like, or you want to follow your own program with it. And it's like, then he says, I don't get the results that I want. But if somebody else were like, hey, blah, 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 you should try these out, he'd be like, oh my God, these are amazing. Let's do it. So you tend
Isn't
to
it?
sometimes lose,
Wow.
so like I don't really talk to him much about my business. I don't tell him where I'm at. I don't tell him, what the struggles or the challenges are at. We have somewhat of surface level conversations around that, which sucks, but I just don't
Hmm.
share those things with him like that. And that's why I have other people in my life that I've created a brotherhood and I've done challenging things, because I would rather share it with them because they
Yeah.
give you the validation versus him who is going to question your and it's just like just better not to do that.
Yeah. So how? Because I know we are, and my precept and how I look at life is that my father and my mother were broken.
Right.
Their father and mother were broken. I
Right.
mean, so it's just generation
I,
brokenness,
I don't I
being
don't I
training
don't like
broke.
to use the word
You know,
broken, Ken. I think our parents had generational traumas that they
traumas. That's the word. I
yeah.
probably yeah. Trauma is it, and based on that trauma, and I really never used broken. I always use trauma. So it's amazing that I use broken. So trauma to me is when that pain takes place.
Right.
From that place of they form perceptions and outcomes that they develop in their mind, their thoughts, and from that place they teach us. And so
Right.
however, whatever that picture is that they have formed in their mind, coupled with a lot of our the things that we've picked up from our culture and all those different things, it creates a beautiful stew of some crazy things that we all have to deal with emotionally. So I hear you talking about some of those things that you, as you recognize them, Vikram. How did you decide? Because you're recognizing, hey, there's certain things within me that I need to start working on. When you start recognizing them, you mentioned therapy and stuff like that. What tools, along with the therapy, did you utilize in order to move you from that place to where you are able to stand up and be a little more free than you were before?
Well, I mean, I went into a deep dive. I shut down my real estate company after our best year, and it was a phenomenal year. I shut it down, and I just said, you know what, there's something that's calling me, and I wish at the time I knew that I didn't need to shut it down, that I could
Yeah,
have done other things to.
done both. Hmm.
Yes, I didn't have to live in the area, and I could have done other things, and I could have kept the business alive. Uh, but I didn't have the tools at the time to do that. And the
Yeah.
business was doing remarkable too. Like, I mean, it's still like it was doing fantastic. And I put myself in a state where I thought I needed to suffer. And
Well, you reverted back to, now you could see what you, from what you're teaching me and telling me, that you, when that happened was, you just shut it down. But now what you're teaching people is that
right,
you can have them both.
right.
So that is awesome that you had that journey. So it's, talk to us about this story, because it fascinates me now that you shut off that part, and now here you are telling people, wait a minute, you can do it, but let me tell you what I did, and then you can do it. But go ahead.
So I signed up for a Tony Robbins conference, and I ended up
Hmm.
becoming a platinum partner with Tony Robbins, which just means you get
Nice.
access to all of his live events. You get to sit closer to him. You grow a community of other like-minded people. You realize, like, wait a minute, there's things out there that I thought made me broken. It just, no, there's things that I needed to work on, right? Like, nobody's
Yeah.
broken. They just have things they need to work on. Um,
Yeah.
and I went to, 20-ish or so events over the course of a year. So I think one thing that's really great is that we never get told to take like a life sabbatical unless you get
Hmm.
ill, right? Unless something
Yeah.
breaks, unless you get right. But then you're not really taking a sabbatical, you're taking a recovery period. But I think,
Hmm.
it's when people take time out to learn and to learn about themselves, because, you go from high school to college, college to a job, job to a marriage, marriage to kids. You never really had any self exploration time. And
Yeah.
so when I shut down my business, I took a year to really, just, I took about 9 months to kind of do my thing. But the year prior, I was pretty much MIA from my business. It was operational. I
Hmm.
had management in there. Um, I had a team of people that were trained and they knew what to do. So I just stepped away and I was like, peace. You guys figure
Mm.
it out. And
Wow.
they did, right? Like, it's, it wasn't
Yeah.
there. We had already been through so much of the challenging stuff. I was paying for all the things, like, so the business stayed kind of fine, and we actually had our best year ever.
Hmm.
But what I learned was by going through, courses on relationships, seminars on relationships, reading spiritual books, reading books about masculine and feminine energy, reading books about generational trauma, going to seminars where people tell you, like, people like on stages say, look, you're not broken. You've just had some tough shit go on in your life. Like, you've been
Yeah.
through the
Hmm.
ringer, young man. Like, what you've experienced is more than what most people have experienced in lifetimes, and you've experienced it in a couple of short decades, right? And so
Hmm.
you just have some things you need to unpack, and we need to stop using those as a crutch, and we need to start using that as rocket fuel so that you can help people get to where they want to go, because ultimately
Yeah.
there's no point in suffering if you're not going to help other people with their suffering.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I latched into a community with a gentleman named Bedros Koulian, who came from one of my other coaches, Sharon. And Bedros is a immigrant. His family was poor. They poured gasoline on their head when he had lice, right? Like he had some
Wow.
sexual traumas. I had some sexual traumas growing up. And so I see him as a father figure. Even though he's just a few years older than me, he's taken on a role of a father figure. And
Yeah.
I realized that, as they say, it takes a village. Well, men need a brotherhood of other men. We need men
Yeah.
around us. We need
Hmm.
strong role models, right? We've lacked that ability to have other role models in our life. Like our cultures, you go to your house, you don't listen to other people. Like you do, but like your parents are the ultimate authority. Well, if you go to a village, it's parents are working, it's the adults in the village that tells you what to do, and you listen to
Hmm.
them.
Yeah.
And if there's a problem, the elders of the village come and talk to your parents and say, hey, you're not doing things the right way. Like you're going to screw your kid all up. Like we need to have an intervention. And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yes. That makes a lot of sense. So just going through the different paths, right? Going through tough times, manufacturing adversity, right? Going through this thing called the project, which is a 3 day, 75-hour like military style, Marine boot camp style event. Ken, the first time I went through it, one of the instructors said, I don't care what happens. If at this point, I don't want Vikram sitting with us. And if he's there, I
Wow.
quit. Like I will quit. I will go get the tattoo on my hand removed. And at first we thought it was part of the show. And then I realized
Yeah.
it's been like 90 minutes where they're arguing, and it's, I was part of class number 2. So this was like a first experience where they had this happen. But the integrity that he had to the program was so high that he said, if we're going to bring people in that aren't ready, we are losing integrity,
Hmm.
right? Like we lose
Yeah. Yeah.
integrity. And so I, when I rang the bell, I didn't ring the bell because of physical. I rang the bell because if somebody has that high of a belief around me, I needed to go home and do the work to figure out why they didn't want me in the program. Because in
Yeah.
my mind,
Yeah.
I didn't see what I didn't see. So I had to go home,
Hmm.
and this was in 2019, right? So this was November of 2019. 2020, we hit the pandemic, um, and the world shuts down. So I'm sitting at home reflecting on what happened,
Yeah.
and I finally go back earlier January, February of 2021, and I completed what I started.
Hmm.
And I joined the brotherhood, and everybody says, we're so glad you came, right? The men that
Mm.
knew me, they said, dude, we are so happy you finished. Like, we know you
Wow.
belong here. We know you needed to do work, and we wanted you here, but you were just a jerk when you were with us, and now you're not. And I'm like,
Yeah.
really? Like, and so doing hard work on yourself, Ken, is it's what separates people from having a life that they want in all aspects:
Hmm.
fitness, faith, finances, and family or relationships. And when you start doing tough things on a regular basis, right? And tough things don't necessarily all mean physical, but when you start to do the
Yeah.
tough physical things, it's actually a form of self-love, right? Like when you go to
Yeah.
the gym and you break out in a sweat, you're telling your body and your mind, hey, I love you enough that I'm going to take care of you, even though it hurts, right? It sucks.
Hmm.
It hurts. It's painful. When you go and you do a self-development course, or you go and you do a course on relationships, it hurts because they're going to open up wounds, or they're going to pry into you. But it tells you that, hey, I love you enough that I'm going to invest the time, I'm going to invest the energy, I'm going to invest the money, and I'm going to sit through it when they open that can and all these worms start flying out. I'm going to sit through it, and I'm going to get through it because I love myself enough. And I
Yeah.
had to do a lot of
Yeah.
work around self-love that other people don't have to do because they didn't have the same upbringing. And I applaud you for that. But that's one of the big
Yeah.
things that I went through, was doing an immense amount of self-work, self-development. And now I see people for who I'm seeing more people for who they are versus who I think they should
Hmm.
be.
I think one of the main principles of self development and then personal growth and all the other terminology we use is self love. I believe it is the catalyst,
Mm-hmm.
it is the beginning to the journey, because it is a painful journey, but it is a necessary journey. You
Right.
cannot In the beginning of the show, we had talked about, before we went on the air, we had talked about where I said I love to see the beauty of the triumphant human spirit, um, because there's lots of pain in that. There's a lot of self-reflection.
Hmm.
There's a lot of darkness that you examine within yourself. You go visit dark places, uncomfortable places, and then you, from there, as you begin to get a better understanding of who you are, more revelation as you dig deeper by asking those questions, those tough questions. And you can't lie to yourself, so you know you got to be honest. So you're dealing with the reality of who you are. um, it is the catalyst to begin this journey. Self love is the place to start.
Yeah.
If you can't love yourself, how in the world are you going to love anybody else? How in the world are you going to have a relationship with somebody when they get on your nerve, and they're going through all their crazy things, and you haven't been able to do the same for you? So once I started going through all of my crazy things, Vikram, when I was in a relationship and I see someone going through things, I'm able to empathize
Right.
with them. I'm able to go, hell, I remember that. That looks familiar.
Yeah.
And you learn to give them the space. You have the conversation, and with that person, to come to an agreement where you give the space to grow, to expand, to go through those dark places, because it gets messy in there. But the end of it is when you come out and you go, wow, I like this person. I like who I am.
Right.
I'm not perfect,
Right.
but I like this person. And then the next thing you know, you'll go from there and get, you know what? I love this person.
Hmm.
It's stages,
Hmm.
but it is important to get there. And if you haven't begun, guys, you're listening to us talk about it. If you haven't begun this journey, you're missing out on so much fun. You're missing out on so much pain. You're missing out on so much joy. You're missing out on so much growth. You're missing out on a lot. It is a painful place.
Yeah.
It is where creators go.
Yeah.
That's where God came, and He saw this place was mess. It was a mess. It was darkness, and then the Creator in Him came out, just like the Creator in you and I. When we look into that mess, we go, "Oh man, I got to change this," and we go through classes. We find mentorship. We find other tools to help us, to make those changes, because God spoke to His. He says, "Let there be," and there was. And so you and I got to do the same thing. We got to speak to it and say, "No, this is not who I am."
Right.
That's the first thing we said. This is not who I am. So we speak to the darkness, just like the Creator, when you're coming from the Christian background. So here you are. You've done these programs, man, and I'm proud to have this conversation, because there's some of the things that you're talking about relates to me, because I had some similarity in my journey like yours. I abandoned my business because I thought, you know, um, I did the same thing, man. So
Yeah.
we had to learn, as I was talking about the yin and yang in life, we find our balance. And we are in a space now where we've learned that you can do both. So
Yes.
talk to me, after you've gotten out of the class, you came back the second time, the men recognize you, you began to see the purpose of what you have going through. But I think, Vikram, I think the teaching part is our reward.
Right.
I think that's to me, when we become teachers, that's the reward
Right.
for all the journey that we've gone.
Right.
Because you and I, when we teach people and we see that they get it, as they say, where they understand who they are, it brings us a tremendous amount of joy that is unspeakable. It is priceless.
Right.
So I think the reward that we get is becoming teachers. So talk to me, before you got to that place of becoming a teacher. What um, what are the steps that you took within that little space, and then how did you make the jump from where you are to decide to say, "Hey, I think I'm at the space now where I could turn around and teach people."
I've always been a teacher, Ken.
Hmm.
So I've always played that role as a as a leader and as a teacher. And all of the businesses I've had, I realized at a young age that if you want to go fast, you go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And
Hmm.
even though I could have made more money, being a solo entrepreneur at times, I knew that it's more fun having a group of people with you, and it's more fun lifting
Yeah.
others up. It's more fun, right? And you have just a lot more experiences, right? You have a lot more excitement when you have a group of people around you. And so I started teaching really, like I wanted to get onto more podcasts. I wanted to share my story more. I wanted to, it's stuff that I always wanted to do, even when I shut down my business in 2018. I just didn't have that
Hmm.
confidence, right? So last year,
Yeah.
after I went back, after I completed this insanely difficult challenge, I mean, there was a class that just graduated, class number 12 graduated last week. 43 men were signed up, 26 men showed up, 15 men graduated. So I
Wow.
mean, it is a difficult process. And one of the guys, he quit with like 15 hours left. Like, he had gone through the
Wow.
hardest of the hard stuff. There was one or two really tough things left, but at that point, like, the majority of the difficult, like, because as you go through everything, it becomes less difficult. So you're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna have to
Hmm.
do this. Oh, okay, I'm gonna have to do this. You flip a switch in your mind, and you're just like, I'm gonna make it through no matter what. And one of the guys broke in the last few minutes, right? Like, you go through
Mm.
so much and you break in the last few minutes. And so when I went through that, and I was like, all right, like, I belong, right? I created a coaching business. Uh, I hired a team when I didn't have any money. Everybody's like, just go get clients, go get clients. And I'm like, no, I want to build a team. I want to have systems and structure. Like, the money will show up.
Hmm.
I don't want to just do it the easy way, right? Like, I want to do it the way that's going to be sustainable. Like, when
Yeah.
COVID hit and we shut down our business for the first time I've ever shut down a business, like, for an extended period of time, um, and we only shut it down for 2 weeks, because if Walmart's going to be open, you better believe that my wellness center is going to stay open too. Like, I am definitely
Hmm.
cleaner than Walmart. And you go into Walmart, you get fat and unhealthy. You come into my center, you get lectures on how to eat, how to drink, how to live a better lifestyle from all of the employees, and it actually makes you stronger. By all means, shut me down, government. Like, I ain't shutting down my store because corporate America says that we should shut down the wellness facility. So I kept my stuff open, but I started getting into the teaching and the development stage after I finished the project the second time. I started wanting to
Hmm.
share the story. I wanted to. I grew the confidence back in myself, where I was like, you are worthy. You have done the tough stuff. You do deserve to have, the story shared with other people, because there are other people out there, Ken, that grew up on what they say the right side of the tracks, right? There's no right or wrong side. It's
Yeah.
just the
Yeah.
side you grew up on. But, um,
Yeah.
there are people who grew up like I did that are struggling because they feel like, well, I didn't have to struggle financially. And so if I didn't have to struggle financially, then I shouldn't have anything to complain about. And
Hmm.
just because your family had the means to provide for you, that doesn't mean anything, because there are still emotional traumas that everybody's gone through.
Yeah.
And I don't care
Everyone.
if you're a billionaire son, or if you're the son of a guy who, you know, is working 6 jobs and you have cockroaches in your apartment. You still have trauma that you grew through. And sometimes the people that grew up in impoverished areas have less emotional trauma. They have
Less
physical,
trauma. Yeah.
because the families were like,
Hmm.
hey, we're going to show you how to get out of this situation, but this is what
Yeah.
we have to
Yeah.
do. We want you to do something else. And they teach the kid the value of the dollar. They teach the kid the value of hard work. They teach the kid the value of being a good human being. Right now, it goes both ways. Obviously, if you grow up with money, you have more opportunities, more doors are open, et cetera, et cetera. There's less crime around you, but everybody has trauma, and hurt people hurt
Yeah.
people. So I decided, last year, as I started growing this new coaching business, as we were getting some traction, as we were getting some successes, I started getting a little into my head. I started getting a little egotistical. and God just came and whacked. I call it whack-a-mole, and he
Mhm.
whacked that mole right on back down. And I said, "Oh, okay. I was getting a little ahead of myself. Okay, thank you, God, for
Yeah.
reminding me of being humble while being great." And now, fast forward, it's been 1 year since I shut down my business with my dad. Well, I left that partnership. We at this time last year were not speaking,
Mm.
and I was fully accepting if I never speak to him again, that's okay.
Yeah.
Like I
Wow.
was fully accepting. I just finished the project, and I was fully okay with never speaking to him again. I said, you know what, like
Hmm.
I'm no longer going to be a punching bag for anybody. And and as I started to stand up for myself, I realized it's time. Like it's time to share.
Yeah.
It's time to go out. Like you've put in the work. It's time to go out and let people know that the world isn't as bad as you think it is, but you need to get through what you need to get
Hmm.
through. And for me, it was a seven-figure investment. It was 6 years of time. Uh,
Hmm.
I had landed up in some places where I hope nobody has to land up, right? Because I got in some trouble, and it was
Hmm.
a lot of reflection. But it was finally completing the project, which is something that I knew that I had to go back to fix or finish, which made me see myself in a different light. And I think for all of
Yeah.
you guys out there is you need to find what is your project. You need to find the thing that
Yeah.
scares you and go do it and go complete it. And you don't have to be the first one in, you don't have to be you can be the last person to finish, but you need to go finish that thing that scares you, that will allow you to feel, oh my gosh, I've accomplished that. And that
Yeah.
gives you a whole nother light on life.
That's absolutely right. I mean, there are things that the ancient Chinese and Japanese, they have this saying that I remember, especially handling death. The concept is to picture yourself dead and to look at yourself. And once you have that vision and that when you come to that place, you're facing all the fears, all the emotional trauma that you go through, so that when that time comes, they always say, and that's one of the things that used to fascinate me with Japanese culture, says it's a good death. And so you have to learn how to face those fears
Yeah.
and become the master of them, because it's all emotional. Thought is a thought that connected to an emotion, and it just blew up. And you're standing in there totally afraid of it. So you have to learn how to disconnect that, how to manage it, and utilize it to fuel you, to use it, turn it around. To you sometimes you have to play like a mental game, and that's, I know, part of the anti. My brother and my sister-in-law went through the program, so they were telling me a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
I studied quite a few of his stuff because I was in the corporate world, and I utilized parts of it, the NLP part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I utilized some of those tools that I learned when I went through that program. It worked. It helped me in my life. So I know that it worked. It helped me a lot in my professional life. So, um, but you have to face those fears, as you said. It is as you become a student, a better student, and that's what I believe. We become enlightened, Vikram, as we become better students of
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. And you talk about visiting the dark places, and as you become a better student of yourself, you become more compassionate, more. You learn more about you, man. It's a beautiful journey. And you talked about the one when you after you got out of class and you decided, hey, I don't need to chat to my dad. But sometimes we dig a little deeper and we see we are bigger than some of the things that we create,
Right.
and then we move through that. And it's all about relationships from one uh, to the another. And the main relationship that I always tell people you must have is the relationship with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It is the main relationship.
Yeah.
From that space is where you're going to have a relationship with others, and you become better at identifying people. You locate people where they're at
Right.
easier, quicker. It's a fascinating thing that happens to you from having a conversation, Vikram. In 5 minutes, you can pinpoint and you know that person where they're at, and you can guide them from that conversation, and they're not even knowing that you're doing that.
Well,
It's
that's
really a
part of the
fascinating.
NLP too.
uh, yes, and that's part of it as well that
Learning language
I had
patterns.
learned. Yes, and so you become a bit better student of yourself. I keep telling people it is the best journey you will ever go
Yep.
on, and we have Vikram talking about how he abandoned the business part and pursuing the spiritual aspect of growth, and now he's at a place where he decided, okay, I want to be a teacher, and you put the programs together, and you're getting all of the stuff. So talk to me about a little, because I know this, as I mentioned to you, this is the reward that we get. Um, give me, I know you don't have to go into
Sure.
detail, but give us a little of a success story of someone that showed up and they believed that they couldn't make it, but you and I know better. And it is a wonderful journey to watch them come from where they present to where they are today. Talk about one or two of those, and how did it make you feel once they got it, as they say.
Well, the journey of a million miles starts with getting up, right?
Hmm.
And one of my clients, sweet lady, awesome, but just has a lot of emotional challenges, right? A lot of limiting beliefs around who she
Yeah.
should be and what's allowed for her success. And, she would get into these funks that would sometimes take her out of, just completely out of commission for weeks, right? Like she wouldn't
Wow.
leave for weeks at a time. And she still gets them, but now it's
Yeah.
like we've created the path where when she starts feeling this self doubt, this, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, we have a plan. And so instead of it taking her weeks, it takes her, a day or two, right?
Wow.
And
That's awesome. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like, her, I call it upper limit beliefs. And when you start getting to
Hmm.
certain points where, you're starting to get really healthy, or you're starting to have a new relationship with somebody and it's going really well, or you're starting to make more money than you've made in a long time or you've ever made, you start sabotaging yourself because you start saying, I'm not worth
Yeah.
$500,000.
Yep.
I'm not worth having this
Hmm.
beautiful relationship with this man or woman. I'm not worth having X, Y, and Z. And you'll start to sabotage yourself. And as we work with as I work with my clients, it's like, hey, when this happens, what are the things that we enjoy doing? Like, let's go back outside. Let's get out in the sunlight. Let's go to the
Hmm.
beach. Let's get into nature. Let's do some meditation, right? Let's get back into the heart where, as long as your heart's beating, you deserve to be as happy and as wealthy and as successful as anybody in the world. And the reason why
Yeah.
we work together is so that we can get you to where you want to go, not where I want to go. It's to where you want to go. And so instead of it taking weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, it's taking days, right? And hopefully we get to a
Wow.
point where it stops doing that, right? Like we get off the medication of life where we are looking for a
Yeah.
pill to fix everything. Um, that those are my favorite stories where, clients they come to you because they want to make more money. And as you start digging into why they're not having the success that they want, you realize that it's not about, yes, there's a skill set that they need. There's systems and processes and self mastery, but you realize that there's a huge familial breakdown in the household where they're not getting the
Yeah.
support from one person or the other that they're looking for, and so they just kind of shut down. And so they're
Hmm.
they're capable of doing so much, but then after a point they stop, and it's like, why did you get to $250,000 but you couldn't get past that? 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Like, why are you stuck at that number? And they, I don't know, it's just where we end up at the year at. I said, but when we look at your numbers, the beginning of the year you were doing amazing, and then as you start getting closer to those upper limits, your business starts to slow down, slow down, slow down, and then the last 3 months of the year you do nothing. And then January hits again and you're on fire. Like, how does that happen? Like how do we do that? And they're like, I don't know. And we've never looked at that before. And, a lot of these people have other coaches. A lot of these people have other mentors. And the mentors, because they don't understand, they just say, oh, increase your goal, make it bigger, make it bigger. And I'm like, you can't make your goal bigger if you don't know why you're not hitting the little goals. And it's because
Yep.
there's these beliefs around their, like their spiritual contract that they have with themselves right now says, this is how much I'm worth. And so when we
Wow.
unpack those contracts that they've created with themselves, they realize, oh, I can actually do more. I could do $1 million. I could do $10 million. I could do $3 million. I could do 500, 300, $200,000. Like, I am not limited to just doing what I did for the last 3 years. And you figure out that a lot of times it has to do with the support system that they've created in their family life. And that support system actually is pulling them down. And so you don't necessarily have to get rid of those people, but you need to learn how. One of the things that I learned that I love is unconditional love with boundaries. So even though my
Yeah.
dad and I weren't talking last year, I still learned that I loved him. I still loved him. I told my mom I loved him, but my boundaries are no longer to be hurt by him. And so if
Yes.
he wanted to have a relationship with us, then he can no longer do certain things. And then I also realized that he had unconditional love with boundaries too. So if I wanted to have a relationship with him, I had to stop doing certain things as well. And if we both stopped doing those, then we would potentially have a relationship, which we do now. And so
Yeah.
teaching those people how to have relationships with themselves and with others. And then once you get through those upper limit boundaries, then it's like, okay, what do we need to build so that you can have the money and time and the energy and the joy, family, the relationships, right? All those things that matter that you want, because most people build
And
their
go ahead. Go ahead.
most
Finish it up.
people build their life right around their business. I teach people how to build their business around their life.
Man, that's just so much. Everyone that is listening, I just want you guys, because the last set of that last conversation that Vikram went into is some powerful stuff. And what we do here at Threads of Enlightenment, I enjoy this conversation so much. We encourage everyone that is listening that felt that, okay, I believe that this man can take me to the next level. I want you guys to get hooked up into his classes, man, because that's the key. I know a lot of people um, financially get stuck at a certain place, and it's usually an emotional disconnect that once it's recognizable, and this is what he's talking about, he teaches people how to do that. The fact that you had moved your client from months to days is phenomenal. And I know once she gets to days, she's going to be coming out. So hours and stuff like that. So everyone that's been listening to this conversation, we've been talking about an hour now, and this is some good stuff. And I want you guys to get in touch with him and learn from him. Get your businesses in order, get your mind in order, so that you can have both your business and your spirituality together, connected, the yin and yang that you guys hear me talk about in every aspect of our lives, so that we can be better human spirits while we're here. Vikram, I want to thank you, man, for coming by and just giving us so much. And it's my hope that the Threads of Enlightenment family will start getting in touch with you and have you take them from there, man.
Yeah, you guys, if you wanna connect with me, Instagram, Coach Vikram Deol. And I also have a podcast, which it's kind of similar to this, where we talk about how people go through their journeys and get back up off on their feet. It's called Be Real with Vikram Deol. And Ken, I appreciate you and your audience, everybody in the enlightenment community. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Everyone who's listening to this podcast, we hope to continually help you to learn how to embrace moments of darkness, because it is in the darkness that we learn how to develop and use our abilities to truly see those parts of ourselves, often invisible to us, in the light. It becomes your responsibility to navigate through all of your trials, to find out who you truly are, and begin your journey to loving yourself, which is possibly one of the most difficult things you will ever do in your life. To love yourself and to find the real you. But always remember to enjoy the journey. Thank you for coming by. Please subscribe. And if you can support us financially, we deeply appreciate it.